Welcome back. The Treasury Department has just unveiled its final regulations on digital asset tax reporting, shedding light on compliance and potentially closing a substantial $50 billion crypto tax gap in the U.S. Joining us is a Senior Director of Government Solutions for TaxBit, Miles Fuller. Miles, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Now, I'm really excited to kind of learn a little bit more about this. Taxes gets everybody so stressed and confused, but I think this is a great opportunity to learn a little bit more. So can you provide an overview of TaxBit and what your organization does and specializes in?
Sure. TaxBit's a technology company. We do software that is really designed to enable companies that operate in this space meet the regulatory compliance requirements. So that might be companies that are helping individuals buy or sell or trade cryptocurrencies, or a company that might be holding cryptocurrency on its own books and records, and it needs to account for that properly under various accounting rules. And then we also, as the third prong, is we help governments or governmental agencies that need to deal with compliance review for individuals. Now, one specific area that's probably relevant to today's conversation is the tax world. So we work with agencies like the Internal Revenue Service on certain stuff, but we also work with companies that the exchanges, or what are now would be known as brokers, that enable tax compliance. So it makes it easier for individuals to file taxes. And I can talk a little more about that. That's what these regulations that just came out deal with.
Now, the Treasury Department, as you mentioned, has just released final digital tax regulations. Why are these regulations so significant for the digital asset industry?
They should be huge in just helping individuals have an easier time filing their taxes if that individual, does stuff involving cryptocurrency, or what the government now has taken to calling digital assets. For those that operate in that particular space for the past 10 or 15 years, if you were buying or selling cryptocurrencies, when it came tax time, it was very, very difficult to do all the calculations, to track the various units of, say, Bitcoin or Ether that you owned, and then hopefully get it all correct on your tax return. One of the areas that came in a few years ago, Congress came in and said, hey, we should really make this easier. It's not clear if people are being compliant, and on that front, it's probably even less clear if the lack of compliance is intentional or just because people have a very, very difficult time doing it. So Congress created some laws in late 2021 that would require what are known now as digital asset brokers to provide tax information returns to their customers. A tax information return is akin to what you and I and all probably get, like a W-2, or you might get a 1099 document at the end of the year. These are documents that we receive that help us put the correct information on our tax returns. So now certain digital asset brokers are going to provide that type of documentation for their customers, so their customers have just easy things to reference when they're preparing their tax returns, whether they're doing that personally or they're relying on a tax preparer to do it.
Now, how will these new regulations impact the digital asset industry, both in the U.S. and internationally?
Oh, that's a really good question, especially because the digital asset industry is very much a global industry. The nature of cryptocurrency itself, everything's on networks that span around the world, so you can quickly move assets around. Now, here in the US, it'll have an impact domestically because the regulations that were passed or finalized, I should say, apply to US digital asset brokers that have US customers or have a connection here to the US. And there's a little bit of gray area rules, or I shouldn't say gray area, a little bit of nuance in for brokers that are located outside the US, but they may have a connection, meaning they may be servicing US customers. And that's maybe a little nuance to get into. But the idea is here domestically, individual US taxpayers will get documentation to help them do their taxes. Now, the brokers that are going to provide this documentation are going to need to get some systems in place. One of the key elements of that is initially they need to start collecting information about their customers, such as their customers' names, addresses, your tax identification number, which is really your social security number. So they know who to give the document to and who to provide information to the IRS about. On the international front, it's going to, the plan of these regs is going to connect with some broader international rules that are being looked to be enacted in the next couple of years to make the global reporting system more broad. So people, as they operate even domestically or outside the United States, will have an easier time doing their taxes accurately.
Now, what are the next steps businesses should take now to prepare for the new compliance obligations that will come with these regulations in future tax seasons?
So I think the first step, the regulations, I didn't touch on this yet, as finalized, will go into effect beginning January 1, 2025. And what that means is as of January 1, 2025, digital asset brokers, so those are the businesses that will be required to report, they will need to start collecting information from their customers. And they will need to onboard with what we would call onboard their customers, which is getting information about their tax identifying number, their name, address, that kind of stuff. That there's a process there that they should be undertaking. And they should be starting that process really immediately to get that going, because that's sort of a big lift to have happen. Separately, on January 1st, 2025, they will need to start collecting transaction level data about transactions that are occurring on their exchange. The good news, most of these businesses are already doing that. In my experience in this space, most of the digital asset brokers are already capturing that information. What they need to start doing, though, is thinking about how they're going to make that information available or accessible so they can put it on this form, because when you get into early 2026, that is the time period where they will need to file a form with the IRS and give a copy to their customer that describes, provides during the year, what are all the sales of digital assets that occurred during 2025. So there's a couple different steps there, but really the first thing is just to get things moving and start gathering customer information and start identifying what information they're already collecting, what they still need to collect, and how they're going to make that collected information accessible.
Now, as I mentioned, anything to do with taxes always gets people stressed out, a little bit nervous. Do you think this will actually help people, especially those who are kind of in this industry?
I think so, and I'm 100% with you. I spent 16 years as a lawyer for the Internal Revenue Service, but the idea in my life, if I were to get a letter in the mail from the Internal Revenue Service, I would still get that same level of stress or anxiety that all of us get. Even if you're thinking like, no, I'm pretty sure I did everything right. And this space, the digital asset space, is even that plus more, because it's so difficult to take the data you get and turn it into an accurate tax calculation. So I think with that in mind, this new information reporting is going to ease the stress of a lot of individual taxpayers, and that's a very good thing. It makes it very easy. Like if you have a job at the end of the year, you get a W-2 document, hey, I just need to take what's on this document, put it into TurboTax or put it on the tax return myself, or take it to my tax preparer. He knows where to put it, or she knows where to put it, and do all of that very seamlessly with a lot less stress. And you have the ability to say, hey, this is the document they gave me. This is what they said the number was. I just put the number in the box where it was supposed to be. Everything should be good. And I think that will reduce some stress for individuals, or at least I hope it will. And from the IRS's side, they will have an easier time taking that information in, understanding who is compliant, and really have maybe an easier time understanding if there's people that are not compliant. And then, individuals that are compliant don't have to worry about getting letters from the IRS when they're like, hey, I did it right. Why are you talking to me? The IRS can focus on the people that truly are not compliant.
Now, I think this is really interesting because it shows how, as a society, we are evolving and, how things are changing. And I think that's so interesting. And it's so interesting to see that, things are being updated with this. With that being said, where can listeners go to find more information about these regulations? And how might this also impact their digital asset investments?
Yeah, well, I think on the upside, to answer your first question, where could they go? They could come to our company name is TaxBit. They can come to our company website. That's www.taxbit.com. We actually have a variety of blog posts there describing these regulations and sort of the evolution of these regulations since the law was enacted back in 2021. There is a lot of other specific individual content as well, just talking about crypto taxation in general. So if you're an individual and have questions, you can learn a little bit more, but definitely if you're an enterprise or a business and you have questions about what your obligations might be in the tax world or even in the financial accounting world, we have a lot of content there available to do it, to help with that. Now, I was talking about that, and you had the second question.
The second question was basically how might this impact, someone's digital asset investments, moving forward?
Oh, on the investment side, what I think longer term, although you probably saw there's been a bounce even this week, as we've heard news that the SEC is approving a spot ETF for Ether, which is a specific type of cryptocurrency. But this type of compliance or reporting going into effect, I think is going to have, even in the short and in the longer term, a increase, increase in the value or the desire for individuals to enter into this ecosystem and invest in cryptocurrencies. One of the things is over the past number of years, cryptocurrency has been really an alternative asset that little people are nervous about. It is very volatile, and there's limited amount of investments. Well, the way to make it more mainstream and more of an acceptable investment to individuals is when you start to put up some of these rules in place so people understand, like, hey, if I do this, I'm going to get this information. I'll know what my tax obligations are. I'm going to feel like I'm not doing something that the government thinks is illegal or illegitimate. So I think the long-term impact of the regulations will be a benefit to this entire ecosystem. It's as it brings it more mainstream and makes it more widely accepted globally.
Now, I definitely want to add that, first of all, thank you so much for joining us and kind of having this conversation just to help ease the stress and the anxiety that comes with dealing with anything with taxes. And as we mentioned, cryptocurrency is, although it's been around for a little while, it's still kind of new to a lot of people and more people are getting into it. And so this is information that people definitely need to know. So I definitely want to say thank you so much for joining us and kind of having that discussion.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for having me. I love to join and talk about this stuff. It's a super interesting space, and it is. It's a new area and it's evolving. So it's great to talk to people about it and educate them a little bit, and always answer questions that people have.
Thank you once again.
Thanks.
For more information, you can visit their website at taxbit.com.